One. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's MBTI or Personal Development Debrief video. My name is Maria Sumilov. We may have met if we haven't. Hi, I'm the personality decoder, and I'm a certified MBTI practitioner, a master integration mentor with the Sumilov Academy of Human Integration, and I'm here with the joy genius Lisa Payne, who is an Enneagram profiler. Hi! She's an emotional archaeologist, and also she's a senior integration mentor with the Sumilov Academy. And it's good to be here with you, Lisa, today. What are we talking about today?
It's good to be here with you and everybody who's watching this. The sun is not in my face. It might look a little distracting, but it's absolutely fine. It'll probably be gone in a few minutes. So today we are talking about personal sovereignty. Ooh, can't wait to jump into this.
Well, this is a big topic, of course, because it's the basis of most of personal development. If you don't have personal sovereignty, or you don't realize that you have personal sovereignty, you don't realize that you have a choice. And if you don't think that you have a choice, then change can be really difficult. Have you experienced that before?
Oh, absolutely. One of the first things. Well, no, it wasn't one of the first things. When I was doing MBTI, when I learned about MBTI, it was the first time that I realized that people thought differently. And that blew my mind, which meant that it wasn't about necessarily how I affected others and how others affected me when I made my decisions, even though that comes into it. I could start from me, and I could start not worrying about how this person was going to do this and how that person was going to do this. I was my own person, and it literally took me a week of working through that. And a lot of people will be going, what? But it's just the way that I was. I thought that we all thought about things in the same way, and then we all did them in the same way. And learning that I actually have my own personal sovereignty, that was the springboard for going, okay, now let's do this.
Yeah. And that's a big deal. And I love that you've had an experience where it was a question of realization and you were doing it through your personal development work. Some of us were not so lucky with having had narcissistic parental abuse. You don't realize that you have any kind of personal sovereignty because you're not a real person. So my experience was a little bit different to yours, and that was it wasn't even any kind of a concept of or any kind of a possibility on my radar for such a long time, and then getting into it and trying to acknowledge my personal sovereignty was quite the fight, because not only did I have to fight myself, I had to fight the parent who raised me. And of course, as children of our parents, we tend to look to them for guidance in who we are and how we are. So there are different levels of this realization journey, and every level is super valid. So I really love that we have such different experiences in that. I'd like to cover a little bit about what personal sovereignty is, because it may seem like a bit of an etheric theme. Shall we start with that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so personal sovereignty to me is just the fact that you know that you have control over your own life and your body and your thoughts and your feelings, that you own you. I remember some months ago, and this is quite recent, which is very exciting to me when I find another level of personal development in something, having done this for such a while, a long time. I had a rebirthing experience, and I was in meditation, and I was lying down, and in my meditation state, I felt like I was sitting on a chair and I was traveling through time and space where, stars and the galaxy was kind of moving past me at a really high speed, but I felt really safe. And I arrived to this hospital room, and I saw a woman delivering a baby. And I didn't understand what it meant. I remember the confusion in the meditation, because I tend to have quite a lucid experience and relationship with meditation. So I'm ready to always just be whatever it is, and it makes sense to me straight away. But this didn't make sense to me. And I looked up at who the woman was, and it was my mother, and she was giving birth to me. And having done the kind of the pattern breaking work around the narcissistic parental space where I don't belong to myself, I had actually come to a point where I was ready to own myself, to be a sovereign being fully. And the woman, my mother, gave birth, and the baby arrived, and she belonged to me. And that was a very profound experience, as you can imagine. That was my kind of moment of realization that I actually own my life, that I own my body, that I own my thoughts. Imagine holding a baby, a newborn baby, and now you are responsible. So it was a real beautiful, it felt like a really beautiful symbolic way of really stepping into my own life, was to have that meditation space. You mentioned that you had the experience of realizing your sovereignty through personal development. Have you had other situations where you've kind of gone like, oh no, I do have power over this?
Well, firstly, thank you for sharing that story, because that's a very powerful story, and it's also very recent for you that this has happened. So I imagine you're still processing the whole thing, daily.
Yeah. I have a daily protocol for because the narcissistic parental wound breaks your psychology, it breaks your personality, so you have to reestablish yourself every day. So I have a protocol that I utilize now, with that being a major part of it. So yes.
Okay. So when I was younger, and I only came into, I've been doing personal development for a while, but I only came into MBTI 6 or 7 years ago. So it is that late that I, with the sovereignty about the thoughts. When I was younger, I used to take the things that my mother said as gospel. When you finish university, you can leave. So when I finished university, I moved countries. And one of the things she used to say a lot was, when you get married for life.
Oh.
And that's not the whole story, right? Because there's a lot of meeting that person and happily ever after, if happily ever after is the thing that happens, right?
Yeah.
And so whenever, and it wasn't a lot, whenever I would think my life could be different, or I didn't have to be with him, the thoughts of my mother, the words of my mother would come back. When you get married for life.
Yeah.
Almost as if, and this wasn't something that she said, that I became his, right?
Right.
As opposed to me. Now, when it got too much for me, I experienced cognitive dissonance and broke away from all of that. And so me actually having one of those moments where I let things happen, let them happen, years and years and years, and then said, enough, I want a divorce.
Yeah.
That was like a separate part of me that said, we have got to be separate from this person.
Right. Right.
Otherwise, he will destroy your life. And so it's like this deep well within me was just like, you know what? We're not going to take this anymore. So pulled away and said, it's not about what you want at the moment anymore.
Yeah.
It's about what I want and what I want to be.
Yeah.
And that for him was incredibly jarring because that wasn't the kind of person I was with him. And we were married for 14 years. So when
Right.
I said that, he assumed that I would go to sleep and I would wake up in the morning and then I would change my mind because that he would say hurtful things all the time and then say, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, well, I don't say things I don't mean. So
Exactly.
when I said it, I meant it and I wasn't going back
Right.
on it.
Right.
And so that was me separating myself from him and
Yeah.
separating my sovereignty from him and say, this is the conditioning and this is what I was taught. However, now I am pulling away from that because
Yeah.
it can't only be about my conditioning. It has to be about my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions around me.
Exactly. That's such a great and I think profound share that you just did there, because I think a lot of people lose themselves in relationships. I certainly have. I'm super grateful that you shared that.
Thank you.
That particular one. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I remember personally being in relationships in the past and being in this relationship that I am right now and have been for the last 10 plus years, over a decade. And because I guess one of the beautiful things about being with an INFP is that they don't let you be anybody other than who you actually are.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because it's so much about the authenticity, that I don't have that wiggle room, and I've had to grow out of that kind of codependence space, and I've had to be a sovereign person. So I'm often thank my partner for being that catalyst for me and not letting me get away with that. So it's so amazing that your example is just so incredibly profound. And of course, you can be yourself and be in a relationship. So had there been, in your case, do you feel like uh, if he had actually embraced you as a sovereign being, and wanted you to be who you are, that your relationship perhaps would have continued? We don't actually know that, but like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, because
yeah,
we wouldn't have had the issues and the things that were in my subconscious for a really long time until because things would bubble up and then just go back down and bubble up and go down. And then eventually it was like, well, a volcano will only bubble up and go back down for a while. And then it actually erupts because there is a change that has happened within, and all of that can't be contained within anymore, and it has to come out. So I think I
yeah,
did a lot of introspective work without knowing that that was what I was doing. And then there's
right,
also this part of me that was like, no, you were not meant to be subsumed by this person.
yes, yeah, yeah,
And so that was me, violently, as in words, tearing myself apart and separating from that
yeah,
person. And it was the
yeah,
first part of me saying, you are Lisa Payne. You are not his wife
wife,
necessarily. You don't have to take this.
yeah,
And
and you
so
can, sorry,
it was almost against my will, because
right,
I didn't know it was happening until it happened. It's not like I sat there and thought about it and planned it. It was like the straw meet camel's back, and then that was it. My psyche, it was either that or my psyche um, disintegrate in another way, and
Yeah,
I just wasn't having it.
yeah, yeah. And recognizing that you've hit that point and having the capacity to say, this is not okay for me, that's a skill, but it's also, in your case, shows this determination and clarity, that this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's so easy so often for us to get overwhelmed with the demands that are coming from outside of us,
Mm-hmm.
from our family members, our partners, our work, just from other people in general, in traffic. you're,
Mm-hmm.
you're having to co-create with other people in traffic. And we can take on these different roles like wife and then think that that's who we are, or
Mm-hmm.
colleague and then think that that's all that we are. And I don't subscribe to that, because we are who we are, and then we have these different roles that we play and different functionalities with different people. Doesn't mean that those things can't be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
But we should have the choice on which roles we do and don't play. And we do have that choice. We just don't realize it because it's easy to get cluttered. So we can forget that we are actually the ones that make that decision about our bodies and our thoughts and our actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of the times we confuse sovereignty with boundaries. So I often
Mm-hmm.
get asked, is sovereignty the same thing as having boundaries? And for me, it's kind of like yes and no, because on one hand, they are a very similar thing. They're a part of a similar set of skills. So for me, it's boundaries enforce your personal sovereignty rather than being personal sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
So the boundaries are not our personal sovereignty. It's a tool that we utilize,
Yeah.
to be personally sovereign, which for me includes freedom of thought, freedom of values, freedom of self-expression, and to protect that sovereignty of freedom, we then set and enforce boundaries. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you, other than saying to protect your sovereignty and your freedom, other than saying I'm not staying in this marriage how it is, have you other experiences that have been meaningful and a way to illustrate your own experience in utilizing boundaries to protect your sovereignty? Because the marriage example is quite a as you said, eruptive example.
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Mm-hmm.
had other experiences around that?
Well, living with my adult children.
Mm.
So years and years, when the relationship changes from them being youngsters and me being their mum, to when I'm a grown up and when I want to do things and when I'm going to do things, and hearing but you can't do that because dot dot dot, and it's like, I'm a grown ass woman, I can do anything that I want to. I am not
100%.
just your mom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where you need to accept that you knew me one way when you were younger, and I was a whole person
Yeah.
before you ever came along. I was still a whole person with these two clingy things to me while you two were young. And now you will go off and you will live your lives. And
Yeah.
while you're here, I will continue to live my life. There are parts that you are a part of, and there are other parts that are independent of you. So actually teaching them that just because you live with somebody or just because that person is your mom doesn't mean that you have the right to tell me what it is I can and cannot do because of the way that it affects you when you're an adult, or because I to stay with that. I'm
Yeah.
going to carry on, and you take your feelings and your emotional responsibility over here,
Yep.
and I will carry on. Because there were times when, they were younger, if they would say something, I would not do something. Like with little children, if you get ready to go out, say you have date night, right? And
Yeah.
you date night every week. And as soon as you get ready to walk out the door, your children come running to each of your legs and grab around them. Like, you can't leave me, you can't leave me, and stuff. This is an adult version of like that. And it's like, absolutely not. When I was younger, that might have made me go, oh no, I can't go out.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
now it's like kicking that person off of me, going, no, that this is not how, this is not
See you
me.
later. Yeah.
So yeah, you do you and let me
Uh,
do me. And teaching them. So teaching them that they are their own sovereign people.
well,
And it
exactly. It
means
goes both ways.
exactly so that when they get into relationships, they don't have to feel this. There's an interdependence that we would like to develop. However, the codependence thing, well, no, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And when they realize that, then it becomes much easier for them to be like, okay, well, I do things with this person,
Yeah.
And then I do things separately from this person. I think I taught them that lesson really well.
Yeah. Nice. You sound really clear about it. And usually it's by the time we have a lot of clarity on something, we've learned it pretty well. So yeah, sounds like it. That's awesome. And you talking about yourself and in this intergenerational piece where you're wanting your children to see, grown children to see you as a person, not just as mom. It
Mm-hmm.
reminded me of Betty White, who recently passed away. So if you're listening to this much, much later, it's now January 2022. And she passed away recently, and she was working in the industry for decades and decades and decades, like something like 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so people who knew her from certain era think that that's what made her famous, but she was famous for such a long time. I thought she became famous in the Golden Girls, but in fact, she had been famous decades and decades before. So we have this, the generations that come behind the previous ones, we have a point of reference to that person and who they should be. So Betty White should
Mm-hmm.
be the Golden Girl, one of the Golden Girls. Of course she was, not saying that she wasn't, but that's not all that she was. And I think that, your children as well have realized you are so much more than just mom, and freaking well done on teaching that to them, because
Mm-hmm.
they will, that codependence in relationships, if you cannot be a separate person from your partner, you can't actually fully appreciate who they are, because
Mm-hmm.
anything that they do, you feel is a reflection of you otherwise. So
Yeah.
that's incredible. I think I have a bit of a lighter, less complex and intergenerational example around
Mm-hmm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
which is unusual that I have the lighter example in any
Mm-hmm.
room, because the nerdiness that follows me everywhere. But I'm always thinking about this particular, like setting those boundaries to preserve the personal integrity and the personal sovereignty. I think about it in a way that because people come and tell me all kinds of things all the time. So people confide in me a lot, and I, as a very empathetic person, and certainly with my background in the challenges in the time I was growing up, I'm likely to get swept away by their pain. Full story. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this is not just me. I know that it's a lot of intuitive people who struggle with the same thing, and especially feelers. And so a friend tells me a story about something horrible that just happened, and I will just get completely involved in their reality, and I'll support them going through their reality, and then I end up exhausted. And mm-hmm. That's not healthy. Okay to say, you know, your you through your experience without making it about myself, without me getting involved, because I can't actually support the other person as well as I can if I stay detached. So if I can observe and say, how are you feeling right now? What is it that you actually need, instead of going in there and trying to make it better for them without mm-hmm. them even asking. So my kind of approach or something that I really want to highlight from my perspective is, we don't have to get in on other people's business every 5 minutes. We can just stand back and be an anchor for that person who's going through something tough, so that they don't have to then worry about what our reaction is going to be about that. So when we learn the value of our sovereignty ourselves, we also learn the value of other people's sovereignty as well.
Yeah.
But I get swept up in people's stories and pain and so on, and that's just not a sustainable model of existing mm-hmm. in any way.
Completely agree.
I'd like to maybe leave it at that for today, because I think we've covered a couple of things. We've looked at what personal sovereignty is. This is another rabbit hole that we could certainly go down on, for forever. But I think I want to keep it so that we can have some actionable items, rather than just treat this as an intellectual entertainment. So if we know what our personal sovereignty is, we can start practicing it. Mm-hmm. and highlighting some of the kind of the boundaries that we can set, and start thinking about those boundaries in our own lives. Did you have anything else on this before we wrap up this particular debrief today?
I think no, because if I say something else, it will pull us down a rabbit hole. So.
Fair enough. And of course, you and I, Lisa, we're going to continue into our learning unit around this particular topic. But so we can take it down a couple of rabbit holes as well. And if people want to join us, they can join us on summaloft.com. Mm-hmm. But everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I really hope that you enjoyed today's session, and I hope that this debrief gave you a little bit of an understanding, if not a solid examples of what is and is not personal sovereignty. And if you are really ready to establish your personal sovereignty and practice it, and you want to take this deeper dive with us, by all means, join us at the Summaloft Academy of Human Integration, which is our mm-hmm. online personal and professional development platform. And you can find that at www.summaloft.com. You have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so pop in there if you're interested, request to join, we'll send you an email and we'll get you going on that. Now, if you're already a member of the platform, you simply need to log in, go into the debriefs and learning units topic on the platform, and you'll find it there. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for this debrief. And we'll see you at the next debrief. If you're not jumping onto the platform, we'll see you at the next debrief. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.